My name is Oliva Fernández. I'm a Cuban journalist and also an activist.
All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. If you're hungry for more worker and labor-focused shows like ours, follow the link in the show notes and go check out the other great shows in our network. And please support the work that we're doing here at Working People because we can't keep going without you. Share these episodes with your coworkers, your friends, and family members. Leave positive reviews of the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And reach out to us if you have recommendations for working folks you'd like us to talk to on the show. And please support the work that we do at the Real News Network by going to therealnews.com/donate, especially if you want to see more reporting from the front lines of struggle around the U.S. and across the world. My name is Maximillian Alvarez, and I am very excited about today's episode, and I could not be more honored to have Liz Oliva Fernández on the call today, calling in from Cuba. Liz is an award-winning Cuban journalist with Belly of the Beast, an independent outlet that covers Cuba and U.S.-Cuba relations, and she is the presenter of two incredible new documentaries, Hardliner on the Hudson and Uphill on the Hill. Now, listen, everyone should watch these documentaries, and everyone should support the work that Liz and Belly of the Beast are doing, and we have linked to those documentaries in the show notes, and we're going to be talking about them in today's episode. In addition to exposing the sinister interests behind and the devastating real-world impacts of the Cold War Cuban policy of Joe Biden's administration, pushed by powerful hardliners like Senator Bob Menendez, former chair of the powerful Senate Foreign Relations Committee. These films also document Liz's experience as a black journalist from the global South coming to the U.S. to confront the predominantly white politicians and interests waging economic war on her country. Now, listen. For the past 6 years on this show, you guys have heard me talk to working people from across the United States, from virtually every walk of life, about their lives, their jobs, their dreams, and their struggles. Through their stories, you've heard firsthand how people here struggle to live with dignity, to pursue their happiness, and to provide for themselves and their families while navigating the brutal realities of living and working in the gut of the world's capitalist superpower, in the heart of empire. But today, we're going to talk about what it's like to live and work in a country that has been designated a political enemy of U.S. empire, a country that sits only 90 miles away from the U.S., a country where people like you and me live and grow and dream, where people fall in love and fall out of love, where people have birthdays and play sports. A country that politicians here in the U.S. have resolved to strangle into oblivion for the past 60 years. In an article for The Guardian examining the two new documentaries that Liz and Belly of the Beast released this year, Andrew Buncombe writes, quote, "A Cuban journalist is looking to spread awareness of the U.S. trade embargo in two illuminating documentaries arriving in early 2024. Liz Oliva Fernández says whenever she covered news or events on the island, be it the push for democratic reforms or the private businesses springing up after the Castros loosened their grip on power, they always intersected with the sanctions. Oliva Fernández, who traveled to the U.S. to promote the film she co-created, says the sanctions, quote, have a huge impact. Quote, "We're not talking about a small country in the Caribbean sanctioning another one," she said. "We're talking about an empire like the United States that not only stops Cuba having normal relations with the United States, but also stops it having normal relations with the rest of the world. If you can't do business with any country," Oliva Fernández continues, "if you have to pay 3 or 4 times the regular cost of everything because you're buying from faraway countries, if you can't use dollars stores, if you can't create bank accounts, if you can't pay with credit cards, there's nothing you can do, she explained. The sanctions were first imposed by President John F. Kennedy in February 1962, 3 years after Fidel Castro and his revolutionaries came to power in an armed uprising that ousted the dictator Fulgencio Batista. Almost a year earlier, the CIA had tried to kill the nascent revolution in the military debacle known as the Bay of Pigs. It had been one of dozens of attempts to kill Castro. The sanctions have had a devastating impact. Cuba's current GDP per capita is less than $10,000, twice that of Jamaica, but a lot less than in the US, where it is $70,000. Because the sanctions are so wide-reaching, countries across the world who choose to trade with Cuba can find themselves punished. The UN General Assembly has voted many times for the sanctions to be lifted. Outside a brief period when they were loosened as part of a diplomatic breakthrough with Barack Obama, they remain more pervasive than ever. To widespread outcry on the island, Donald Trump added Cuba to the list of state sponsors of terrorism during his administration. President Joe Biden has barely changed that policy. Quote, "When you talk about the U.S.'s Cuba policy, you're really talking about the Trump-Biden Cuba policy because they're the same," says Oliva Fernández, end quote. Again, I'm honored to have Liz with us today to talk more about these important documentaries. And we're going to talk about the process of making them, and we're going to talk about her reflections on visiting the U.S. last year while they were filming these. But as we always do here at Working People and on The Real News, we want to help show y'all what all of these big political forces and what history itself looks like told through the eyes and lives and stories of regular working people. And so, Liz, with all of that up front and knowing all the kind of, things we want to talk about regarding the documentaries, I wanted to ask if we could start a lot further back and talk a little more about you and how you grew up in the very conditions that you are now reporting on as an adult. I wanted to ask, for many people who are listening to this, you may be the first, Cuban that they heard from, at this length. I just wanted to ask if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself, where you grew up, what it was like growing up, and let's walk our way along that path that took you to becoming a journalist, making documentaries, in the 2020s. But let's go back to the start.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a really small town outside of the city of Havana called Managua. I have to say that I have one of the most wonderful childhood. I was really happy. And this is something that a lot of tourists and foreigners are asking, they wondering, how is possible that with so many scarcities in Cuba, children are so happy? And I think it's because when you are a child, at least that's my experience, you're not thinking about that, as an adult, okay, I need to figure out what is going on. I need to put a plate on the table. I need to put food on the table. We are not thinking about that stuff. We just being kids and having fun and running in the neighborhood with other kids our age and playing, going to school, learning how to play an instrument, because we have a particular thing. When I was growing up, there is something called Casas de la Cultura. It's like a cultural houses. And they have they're being in all communities, all kind of communities. And you can go there and learn how to play an instrument, how to sing, how to paint, like a painting, whatever you want. They're free and they're open to all the public children, but also although they want to improve their ability or be more close to arts. So I don't know, playing games as Kikirilata. They're so basic and so simple. We just need a can, and we just crush the can and just play with the can, ping pong, and everything. We don't need so much, and we are like terribly happy, and we embrace. We are not worried about it. We are eating for lunch egg, or we have chickens or rice. No, none of them is that important for us. I would just this is well. If you asking me what is my favorite food, I am gonna say like my favorite food is rice, like white rice with fried egg and platanito, like banana. That's my favorite dish, and that brings me a lot of memory about my childhood, about the way that I grew up, listen to the radio, so opera in the radio with my grandma. Like I don't know, I just was really happy. And when you're a child, you and it's rare because I remember the first time that I have like a fancy um a candy or a snack or something like that. I'm talking about chocolates that are not coming from Cuba, that are coming from outside. And I was in high school, I think so.
Wow.
But when you don't know that those things, you don't think that you don't need it at all. I don't need that kind of fancy chocolates. So for me, it was really strange because, for example, right now that I have the experience to go to the United States, when people ask you if you want some food, they are not asking for the food, they're asking by the brand. And for me, that was really bizarre because if I want salad cookie, like crackers, it's just crackers. I don't need the specific brand of crackers that you like. And maybe that's the kind of things that you are used to do. But for me, I just want crackers, basic salad crackers or cookies or whatever. But I'm not thinking in brands because I live in a bubble. Cuba is a bubble when we don't have all that kind of brands of stuff. We just have cookies and you eat the cookies that are able to you to buy in the neighborhood, the supermarket, or whatever. But we are not thinking about brands. When we think about drinking a soda, we are not thinking in Coca-Cola or Pepsi or Fanta or Sprite, 7-Up. We're just thinking lime, orange, cola. That's all. So it's quite different. And I don't know, maybe I can't explain why, because of course, in the most times passing and you're getting older, you realize certain things that you weren't able to have in presence in your childhood. But that's now. I remember that my mom is a doctor, so she went on a mission to Venezuela when I was 10 years old. And she bring me a baby when I was 12 years old, like a baby for playing for games. Because she wasn't able to buy like a doll. But they make dolls like in front of baby and they cry and everything. But during 12 years, my mom wasn't able to buy me that kind of expensive dolls. And she's a surgeon. So she wasn't able to do that because it was really expensive. There is a really rare things in Cuba. So I have other kind of dolls, but I don't know. The real Barbie, I knew about the Barbie when I was like 10, 11. I don't know. But that's kind of things that we are not exposed. Also, I think that the world was different because we are not posting of social media or internet and bombing you with buy this thing, buy the other thing. You can't live without this. And they are creating necessities on people to buy a lot of stuff that the most of the time you don't need it at all. But I don't know. I think it was simple. If I have to describe it, it was a simple, happy, and really sweet childhood in a really, really far away town. outside of the Havana.
Well, and like, I mean, this is one of the many things I love about your work, right? You know, because of course you've been working to produce, you know, great video documentaries with Belly the Beast before these two documentaries that came out this year. And it's been really important to you to show, you know, people what life looks like inside Cuba, and what working people like, to hear from working people, not just about how, you know, hard life is living under the US imposed sanctions, though you do an incredible job of showing that. But you're always trying to also show stuff like this, like the moments of joy, the humanity, the relationships, the life that is worth living, that a lot of people, especially here in the US, don't think about or don't see. You know, and so that's why I think it's so important for folks to hear what you're saying, and I hope you'll forgive me for asking a little more about it, because I wanted to just
No.
yeah, like ask if you can go back to that happy time in your childhood, and like you said, it was a different world. It was, you know, before the internet, you know, but still, like, Cold War is quote unquote ending. Like, there's a lot of stuff going on in the 80s and 90s that you and I didn't like. It was kind of in the background because we were just kids, right? But if you go back to that
Yeah.
time as a kid, I was wondering if you could just sort of like try to paint a picture for people about what like a week looked like for you going to school, playing with friends, like what the adults were doing, just any more that you can do to sort of like help take people there to understand, you know, like what, yeah, life, daily life looks like, for a kid like you growing up at that time.
Well, I was born in the 90s, in the middle of something that Cuban government called special period, but doesn't have anything of a special more than the crisis that we had to face at that time. In normal week, I just wake up pretty early in the morning because my grandma was obsessed with the punctuality at school. Um, so I just wake up pretty early in the morning. They spend like 20 minutes trying to comb my hair because I come from a mixed family. So it was really difficult for my grandma to try to understand my hair. Um, and how they were, because she wants to comb it like she was a white girl, but I wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent like 20 minutes combing my hair or more, having breakfast, café con leche, like milk and coffee. Something else like with the bread and something like that, go to school. Before I just wake up, my mom is already in her way to the hospital because public transportation at that time was terrible. As I said, we used to live, well, we live already there, still there. We live far away from the city. So she have to go like 30 kilometers to go to her work. Was a really difficult time for her in order to transportation and community from work to home and the other way around. I just have to go to the school, spend that the most of the time. My grandma picked me at noon because I lunch at home, and I come back. I have lunch, take a nap, and come back to school at 2 p.m. For double session. And after, and when I come back from school, I just have to do homework and everything before be able to go out and to spend time with friends. And I remember that my mom used to arrive really tired, sweating because the weather is so hot in the summer. Well, Cuba is always in summer. It's always summer in Cuba. So, and I remember the blackouts, but I didn't suffer like something like I'm being responsible, like because I just fell asleep because it was too hot and I was too tired. And I remember my grandma my mom using a piece of paper to like a fan. For me because of mosquitoes and everything. And I just like I like the Black House is also an opportunity to go out to spend more time in the evening with the friends. So it's rare because when I think about that, I can think in about difficult moments or problems that we had or we have to face. I'm pretty sure that my mom, if you asking this question to my mom, she maybe have a different answer. But in the fact I was a child at the time, I was just living the life. I doesn't have any worry. I remember that sometimes I have go to Casa de la Culturas in the afternoon and I have like dance classes or singing classes or something like that, and I just spend time there.
Well, I mean, I love hearing about this though, because it reminds me of a conversation I had with Ana Jakopic, who's a Slovenian labor organizer today. But we were talking about her childhood in the 80s and 90s, growing up in, again, like at this time when the Cold War is, kind of ending and the world is changing. She's still a kid, and she was talking about what it was like. What she said was very similar to what you said, was like, I didn't know. I was just trying to live my life and have friends and go to school, and it's just, I don't know, there's something both really beautiful about that. It reminds us that life is life wherever you are in the world. And that's a beautiful, sacred thing. And childhood can look, like childhood in such different contexts, because kids just want to play and have fun and explore.
Yeah.
And I think that's something like we actually, it's so simple, but we lose that sense as adults.
Yeah. And we have the freedom to do that because it was just go to the street and play with your friends. There was any danger or something even when the situation in the country was tense, you can feel that on the street with the people. Of course, a lot of people was struggling with the crisis, with food, medicine, but still there, like you can be happy. And because I remember also that the most important thing at the time was bikes. Everybody was riding a bike because public transportation was so bad that people had to bike for miles away in order to go to the point A to point B. And I remember that I started to learn how to buy a bike in an adult bike because, of course, we don't have the money to buy a bike for children, for kids. So I remember that my dad put I don't know how to call it, cojín. It's a kind of almohada pequeña. I forget the name, but my dad put something like that in his bike, and I was sitting there and just with the point of my toes trying to ride in the bike. That's why I learned how to ride a bike. It was three size like my size at the moment. And it was funny. It was funny. I wasn't riding a bike worry about, okay, I need to ride a bike because this is the only transportation that we have. No, I was riding a bike for fun.
And I know for folks who are listening to this, who maybe have grown up, with all the propaganda about Cuba here in the U.S., they're maybe wondering like, oh, well, when you went to school, were you just learning about communism and how bad America is? And was it just blasting from loudspeakers in the streets, or were you guys learning about other basic things and talking about baseball. Like, again, it's a very basic question, but I'm just asking, like, because you know how some people think about this stuff. Like, and I just wanted to ask, like, how big of, like, tell us a little more about the culture, I guess is what I would say. Like, that you remember for people who were there thinking that, like, you grew up in, like, a Soviet, like, other world.
Well, we received a lot of information about imperialism and Yankees and U.S. government being the enemy. But it's interesting because they always talk about U.S. government, imperialism. They don't talk about people. They talk about government structures. They talk about sanctions. They talk about missile crisis that we call it October crisis. We talk about sovereignty. We talk about how they can respect the way that we choose to live. They talk about, I remember some books that talk about militias. I don't know how to translate that in English, but it's a way that civilians come to arms and defend themselves from the enemy. Militia, yeah, thank you. They talk about, of course, the whole story of the revolution and the conquerors and why it was so important to defend that conquer, because that make us allow us to be our own, be like the owners of our destiny. They talk about self-defense. Yeah, of course, we received a lot of information about that history in history classes, and also what is the name of this class? It was like something educación cívica, like civic education.
Mm-hmm.
But we also learn a lot of stuff that doesn't have anything to do with confrontation, war, or U.S.-Cuba relationship or U.S. policy on Cuba. We learn about history, war history. We learn about arts. We learn about sports. We learn about sexual education. We learn about STAs. How can you? I don't know the acronyms in English.
Sexually STIs.
Oh.
Sexually
STIs,
transmitted.
Thank you. Yeah, STIs. We'll learn about pregnant, being a teen, like being teenagers and being pregnant, being like the risk. We learn about autonomy. We learn about abortion rights. We learn about Black people. We learn about so many things. Like that wasn't the main thing. Of course, we have a lot about that. Because we were in the middle of a war. It wasn't like the typical war, but it was an economic war. It was still in the middle of that. So we learned a lot of that. We learned about siege mentality. That's something that we call a lot in Cuba, because this is like continuously trying to be defensive of someone that is attacking all the time. So the most specific like leader movement that you want to do, they maybe see as an attack. Then what else? We learned so many things.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. Again, because it's like,
fact, yeah. And also it's Cuba. I don't want to be like bragging about this stuff, but I'm pretty sure that we have one of the highest education levels on the population in Cuba in the world, all the world. So we'll learn about so many things: math, science, literature, whatever you want. Just pass by this, because Cuban education program is one of the best for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most remarkable achievements in human society, right? You know, like what the amount of literacy and education that was brought to the people of Cuba through the revolution. To say nothing about, you know, the healthcare advances that y'all have made and the advances in your education system. But we never hear about that. We only hear about how awful and terrible Castro is.
The regime is, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
No. That's the question. That's okay.
No, you were going to say something good. That's the thing.
Yeah, it's like, for me, it's ridiculous how people know, if they know the United States about Cuba, all the negative things that we have. But there is no one single journalist, the mainstream media in US, that trying to tell positive stories about Cuba. Maybe it's a question for them, for reporters in US, because it's not only Cuba, it's also Mexico, Colombia, Salvador, Honduras, Haiti. It's like we live in chaos, And US is the most wonderful country in the world. The rest of us are trying to get to the US, the promised land, because we are not capable enough to build a better country, instead of talking about the role the US has been playing in Latin America in general, how that role has been destabilize our countries and force us to migrate to the United States, trying to follow the American dream that they still are selling out for tickets now. So.
Right, like so many. That's the part of the story that so many of us don't hear, is that so many Latinos come to the U.S. chasing the American dream because Americans have stolen our dreams in our home countries, and our ability to pursue them.
Yeah, and also it's not American dream. Yeah, it's American nightmare. I always say that, because it's not a dream.
No, and sister, like, we can talk about that all day, because that's how this show got started. Is the very first interview I ever did on this show was with my dad, Jesus Alvarez, who grew up in a lean-to shack in Tijuana, came to the United States when he was 8 after his dad abandoned him, his mom died. You know, he lived that American dream. And then we lost everything, including the house I grew up in the global recession in 2008. And so, like, he was the first person I interviewed, like I'm interviewing you now, to sort of talk through that, because our American dream had become the American nightmare that you're talking about. And that's a very hard reality for many, many people to confront. And we'll get to that more in a second when we talk about these documentaries. But I wanted to ask just kind of 2 more questions before we get there. Is, like, one, did you think much about kids like me in the U.S., like, in what we were doing and what we were thinking? Like, did that enter your mind at all? And not, it's okay. I'm just curious if you guys thought about what other kids in the U.S. were going through while you were going through everything we've been talking about.
Well, I never have relative or family when I was a kid in the United States. So for me, United States only existed on the news when they talk about U.S. government did that, the U.S. government. So I never thought about U.S. kids. I remember that the only kids that I was thinking about was in the kids of the world that don't have any food to eat. Because when I don't want to eat my food, my grandma always tells to me, you need to eat, because there is a lot of kids out there that they don't have any food to eat. So you have to eat. And it was like, I feeling guilty because I have this food, this plate on the table, and there's a lot of kids that doesn't have nothing. So, but that kid doesn't have any citizenship. when my grandma was talking about them, it was like kids out there that doesn't have any food to eat. But yeah, right now I can't think about specifically in other cases. It's just my world was my neighborhood, my block, my school. It sounds like simple, but that's the way it is. I was thinking in a world bigger than that.
No, I mean, again, I think it's beautiful because my parents pulled the same thing on us. if we didn't eat, it was like, you know, you guys should be thinking about the kids around the world who don't get this, so you're gonna sit at the table and finish it.
Exactly.
So there's something beautiful about that. We didn't know the other existed, but our parents were telling us the same things in such radically different countries. And again, I think that's one of the common themes of this show, and one of the common themes you guys are going to hear about throughout this episode is that when it comes to working people, we are not as different as, you know, we are like made to feel. We have so much in common, and all the things we don't have in common, we have so much to learn from each other and so much to experience together. And it really is more about the kind of structures of power and domination that are fucking all of us over across the world that we need to be focusing on. God, I could talk to you about this for days, but I know we gotta, you know, I want to get us to the documentaries and to like going from there to how you became a journalist. Like, I wanted to ask, was that something you always wanted to do? And how was that tied to you developing your consciousness about the United States and Cuba, and so how were those two paths kind of connected? Like,
I never have been think about this, but I suppose that because when I was a child, I wanted to be a prosecutor, and people was really, what? These kids want to be a prosecutor? Do you mean a lawyer? I say, no, a prosecutor. I want to be a prosecutor. And I was 5. And people was like, what's wrong with this girl? She won't be a teacher. She won't be a dancer. She want to be a prosecutor. That's rare. And I think it's because now I'm thinking, and I think that it's because my grandma, and the sense of justice that she was pushing me all the time. We need to do the right thing. We need to think in others, because this is something that you can develop in Cuba a lot. The feeling of if you're okay, but the rest are not okay, you are not okay. Because we need to think in collective way. We need to embrace the others. My grandma always says the neighborhood is also your family. In fact, it's your closest family. So I grew up going to beaches because the parents rent a bus and put all the kids on the bus and take us to the beach, and we don't have money to buy food at the beach. So all the parents cook one meal for all the kids when want them to spend the day at the beach. So I grew up like, if I have 3 plows, but there is a kid in the school that doesn't have any, I'm going to pick one. And I always remember this lesson from my grandma. If you're a kid, you want to save the blouse or the thing or the pants that you like the most. So every time that I choose like the thing that I like the most for keeping to me, my grandma said, okay, we can give them away. I said, no, that's for me. So, do you like it? Yes, I said, yes, that's my favorite. So she said, that's why we need to give it to them, because I'm pretty sure they're going to love me too. And I was like, what? No. And that kind of thing that my grandma taught me during my entire life, that was something that was running inside of me, to talk a lot about justice and social justice. That's why I want to be a prosecutor when I was 5. But how that became journalist, I think it's because my mom, because I was pretty easy to argue with whoever. I always have something to say at school, in meetings. that was the kind of child that is really impertinent and people don't like. All those adults doesn't like because it's like too much to manage. So in some point, my mom said, maybe you need to be journalist. And I say, oh, but I want to be philology and studying letters, the origin of the language and everything. She's like, no, ask journalist first. And I go through the old tests that you need to do here in order to become journalist. But I wasn't expecting, like, I wasn't dreaming with be a journalist. In some point during the university, I became really activist, like doing acting to trying to talk about racism in Cuba, to talk about all the problems that we have with Black people, to talk about feminism, to talk about LGBTQ rights. So I became more active because, again, my grandma has been taught me about the sense of justice that we need to, and also to stand out for myself the way that I'm doing for others. And in some point, I just was hunger. I just want to link my journalist work to my activism. And I dreamed about the fact that I can make it possible and also to talk to a Cuban audience. So how that ends working for the US media outlet, talking to a US audience, I have to say that the job choose me. I don't choose the word job. I remember that someone called me, my phone, a friend called me, say, okay, there is a US journal director that is looking for a Cuban to do a documentary about the impact of the sanctions on the Cuban people. And I was, oh, okay, that's, I don't know, maybe. Because we in Cuba are tired to hear about the sanctions. And I think that we in Cuba we are really tired to hear all that about the sanctions. And also I think like the government haven't accomplished to communicate it well what the sanctions is. So I was, as a journalist, I was like tired too. I couldn't find the angle. But I say, okay, someone wants to do a documentary about that. And I start all the whole process. And at the end, they select me. They choose me, and we start to do the documentary. It was, I remember, only a 3 months job. Okay, I am doing this because that's translating more money. So I was trying to. I was like finish the university. I was like trying to be by my own, rent a place, everything. So I need money. So I was happy to do it, but the most I was learning about the sanctions on the part of the Cuban people, the most I just discovered, the most my eyes was open to what? I didn't know that. How is it possible that I didn't know that? That's my whole process inside of Belly of the Beast. The most we dig in, the most I learn, the most angry, the most I realize the most that I need to pay attention to that before to pay attention to the rest, because there is not enough people paying attention to this. There is not, because when we talk between Cubans about the problems and the issues that we have in Cuba, and then we need to find a solution, everybody is agree with. But when we talk about the sanctions, people don't understand how big and crushing the sanctions are. So that's why I just for a while, I hope so that I can put the most efforts that I can to talk about this topic, because this is something that is outside of Cuba. We don't have any agency with the sanctions. That doesn't depend of the work of the activists that we are doing inside of Cuba. That depends of a foreign country. As I said in the interview with the Guardian, it's not a small country in the Caribbean. It's an empire. It's one of the most powerful countries in the world. It's the United States. So I realized that I need to pay attention to that. I need to do journalist work about that. I need to show to the people and visibilize the working class people that has been suffering the most the impact of the sanctions during these 60 years and more, because the sanctions affect all of Cubans, if you are in Cuba or outside of Cuba, but affect you more or less depending on your race, your gender, your geographical situation, if you live in a city or rural area, depending on your family is in Cuba or live outside of Cuba, if you're black or white, if you're mixed race. So all these things, the sanctions is like going through our whole life and doing more harm or less depending on the level of vulnerability that we have. So
Well,
I
Well, I just wanted to ask about that because, and like I said at the beginning on this show, like I interview workers largely from the U.S. and Canada, but increasingly around the world, and we have conversations like this, but we talk about their lives, but then we talk about their jobs and trying to make a living as a working adult. And I don't know, we should definitely team up and do more of those with folks in Cuba so people listening to this can hear more about that. But I guess I just wanted to ask you, like, if we were to do that now, like interview a bunch of working people in Cuba, like I just wanted to ask if you could impress upon them how much the sanctions impact their lives as working people trying to get by.
I depends. I think it depends because, for example, if you talk with a doctor or a scientist, maybe that someone who needs prosthetic legs, it's gonna be easier for them to talk about the sanctions and how affect their life of their work. But I think that the most of the normal people in Cuba don't understand how the sanctions affect them, because this is not something you have to understand that it's not a sanctions against you and the Alvarez family. It's a sanctions against a country, and when they talk about this, they always say this just only affects the government. This only affects the government. That the rest is a lie of the Cuban government. Well, that is not only affecting to the government. If you talk with a private entrepreneur, they're going to tell you different. But if there is that the sanctions only affecting to the government, people doesn't know that the majority of the people, the population in this country works for the government. And the majority of people who works for the government, the most of them are black. So impactfully, directly to the black people. But this is like kind of equation that is doing that math, because it's true. It's certainly true. Also, it's impacting the sectors impacted the most by the sanctions: healthcare, social security, and biotechnology. All that sector, the majority women. So imagine be the head of the family. So you have to face all the things, the scarcity and the things in your work. So you have to be resilient, trying to recreate and reimagine all the kind of things or solutions that you are inventing to trying to solve your problem, because you have patients, you need medicine. So imagine all the energy that requires that, and then go home and to try to do the same, trying to be resilient and reinvented what kind of food you're bringing to the table. What kind of, the children are growing up, I need to buy clothes, but I don't have how to buy it because it's all the stress, all the time, all the mentality, the mental thinking that people has been to But this is not something simple. And I know now because I understand better the sanctions, but I didn't know 4 years ago. So for me, it was okay. My mom is a doctor. I know about the impact of the sanctions of healthcare, but I didn't know about the rest. I didn't know how the sanctions affect me or my friends. Or now it's not just the sanctions, it's being on the list of state sponsor of terrorism. How could that affect my possibility to go out to the country or to need a visa to go around, or asking me or going through different inspections because I'm Cuban, so I'm coming from a country who supposedly sponsor terrorism. And on the top of that, I'm Black, so I'm danger. So there is a lot of things that people are not considering itself. For example, when Cuba has its own vaccines against COVID-19, I just remember being in a collective taxi, and someone was so angry about the fact that he wants to travel to Spain, or he's going to. I don't remember where it was the destiny. I think it was in Spain or the United States. Yeah, it was in the United States because he was talking about reunification process with his family in the United States. He was facing a lot of obstacles because the United States didn't recognize Cuban vaccines as legitimate. And he was talking shit about Cuban government, like, you're the responsible because the vaccines, the shit vaccines that you made, whatever. And he was so angry, and he was all the time pointing with the finger to the Cuban government. And he never stopped, like, by a second to say about, wait a minute, we have a vaccines that are pretty amazing. Why are you not recognize our vaccines as good enough or as available? And you are pushing me to delay my reunification process, and I have to face more obstacles. Because it's like United States, for many people, is like a savior. So you need to find guilties around you, because this is the dream. This is the point that I want to reach in some point. So I can't go against that. Also, the sanctions are too big, and at the same times are like not specifically. So it's pretty easy losing the details and point with the finger to the person that you have just in front of you, that is your government. The rest is something that is so far away from you, and you don't have any agency on it. And it's pretty difficult to do that kind of reconciliation. Because of course our government is not perfect. They have a lot of faults, but that thing, that specific thing that you're angry about, that is not because you're government. It's because I'm not their government.
Mm-hmm. Preach, sister. And again, I stress to everyone listening to this that, you know, you got to watch Liz's work. You got to watch the Belly of the Beast documentaries if you want to learn more about this, right? Because they go into it. They show, you know, the different kinds of, you know, products and amenities that we take for granted here in the United States that are just frankly not available to regular working people in Cuba. Not because the evil Castro or communist government won't allow them, but because the U.S. has been strangling this country for 60 plus years. Like, imposing, like, when Liz calls it an economic war, that's what it is. They have been under economic war imposed by the U.S., limiting, you know, every facet of life, like what they can trade, what can come in and out of the country, you know, like the dollars that they use to buy them, right? I mean, like the kind of medical equipment that they can get in the country. Like every delegation of people that I've known here in the United States that's gone to Cuba, the main thing that they say they're collecting to try to take into the country is ibuprofen. Because, like, I just say that to say for people listening, like, think about how much you take for granted being able to go and just buy a bottle of ibuprofen, like Advil, and just like how much that helps when you've got a kid who's, sick, or you yourself have a headache. Like, imagine just not having that because a country 90 miles to your north hates you so much that they want to make it impossible for people in that country to access things like that. Like, if you want to know more about how deep that goes and how much it affects regular working people, again, you got to watch Liz's work, and we're going to link to that in the show notes so you can, watch it after listening to this conversation. But we're not going to be able to sum up all of that she gets across in that work here in the conversation. But I really encourage folks to check it out, especially after, hearing this conversation now. And I wanted to ask Liz, with the time that we've got left, if we could talk about putting together these two new documentaries, right? Like how you tackled that process, of trying to communicate how big and impactful these sanctions are, and what we can do to fight them. Just talk to us about the process of making these two documentaries and coming to the United States to try to address these issues that are impacting life in your country across the board.
Well, that was really hard for me because I was traveling to the United States for the first time, being exposed to the United States for the first time. For someone who is coming from outside, I think that can really relate it with I'm talking about. I'm also coming from Cuba. There is no different, countries more different than Cuba and the United States. And also we have a lot of things in common too. I was really hoping to talk to the politicians, that I was really hoping that they were open to talk with the Cuban journalists, because I was in the country of freedom of speech. And I get really frustrated when I realize that they are not open to having any conversation with someone who thinks different than them. And I was like, what? This is not supposed to be. And for me, it was really bizarre and new. And I have to be in peace with me, because we tried all the things we can in order to get access to them, to the people who actually are pushing for the U.S. policy on Cuba, who are pushing for more sanctions, who are pushing from more isolation to Cuba. Because I have so many questions to ask them, that I feel so relieved when our director of photography, Jihan, say, okay, I grew up in this city, in DC. So I know the people. Let's talk to them. Let's try to think what they think about Cuba, what they think about U.S. policy on Cuba. And I feel so relieved when I talk to people from DC. I didn't know that DC was a Black city, to talk about my country, because the answers that I found then, and also the empathy that I found with them, it wasn't something that I just feel on Congress or in the State Department or places like that. And that makes me feel that there is a hope. It's also a confirmation that the United States is not his government, that there is a lot of United States inside of the United States. And there is a lot of people that feels empathy, not just for Cuba, but also in Latin America in general, and for the war. And there is a lot of people in the United States that feel shame when they know about U.S. foreign policy around the world. And on the top of that, in the global South. And they want to do it better. And maybe they have the possibility to leave the country, to start a life in a new country, but they should stay there because they actually believe that they can make a change. Because in fact, I believe that there is a change in the United States. There is going to be a change in the world, and the way that we related with each other.
I want to ask you a little more about that, because again, these two new documentaries, which we talked about at the top, and folks can watch by following the links in the show notes. The first, which really kind of tracks, Senator Bob Menendez from New Jersey and his role in, maintaining and worsening, the U.S. policy towards Cuba for many years, amidst all of his many corruption scandals. It's a really important documentary that I would encourage folks to watch. But even in that documentary, Liz has a great moment where, again, you're seeing her and her crew struggle to get Menendez to talk to them, let alone address these issues, and of course Menendez never does. But then there's a beautiful moment where Liz goes to Menendez's constituents and goes walking around talking to people about what they think about the Cuba policy, and like how even Cuban expats are not for the sanctions, even if they are anti-Castro. They say we know that these sanctions hurt our people, not the government, so we should stop doing them. And yet the senator who's representing us is like not listening to us and going full bore into increasing sanctions and keeping Cuba on the state sponsors of terrorism list. And then you have another moment like that, which is incredibly beautiful. Frankly, it was the moment that impacted me the most in the other documentary as well. The moment you're talking about, where you're trying to get politicians in D.C. to talk to you and talk openly about U.S.-Cuba policy, and they don't. Save maybe one or two folks who do. But then you go to the constituents, you go to the working people, you go to black people on the streets in D.C. and talk to them, and you see just how vast the disconnect is between regular people and the ways that we talk and think and feel about Cuba, and the people in power and the ways they talk and think and feel about Cuba. I wanted to ask you if you could talk about that a little more, because I could sense, even though it was a beautiful thing to experience and see, that we're not all terrible. We're not all against you and your country. And like, in fact, we don't want this economic war on our fellow working people in Cuba. But I have to imagine it was still very hard for you to talk to people living in the country that is trying to kill your country and has been doing so for 60 years. And still a lot of people don't know about it or don't think about it a lot. Was that tough to grapple with?
I don't think, for me, it's about difference. I get that people have different experience about different topics and different issues on the planet, and also experience about that. Because, for example, if I talk with a Cuban American, I want to listen his experience or her experience about Cuba or with Cuba. And secondly, I want to understand his position and why they think in that way specifically. But we can make it if you talk to me about or whatever. But the most difficult thing for me is when someone that doesn't have any experience in Cuba at all, that never put a foot in Cuba, that doesn't know Cuba or is the Cuban people, and they call themselves Cuba, that they want the best things for Cuba, but they never been here. And they talk to me with so angry, so a lot of resentment about Cuba, whatever, with a lot of angry and hate. And how it's possible that you want the best for us? How the sanctions is helping to get the best? So that doesn't have any sense for me. So that's the moment that I struggle with the most. But with different experience, with different perspective, I can get it. And the most of that this is something that I experience in Jersey, for example, that there is a lot of people that have different experience that have to leave Cuba in the 80s or the 60s with the Balsero crisis and everything. They don't have hate for Cuba. They are sad. They want to come back. They want to be again here. They want to die here. But they don't do it because they promise to the relative, family, father, everything that they never put it back in Cuba until the regime fell. And I get it. And I get it, the sad thing. That's why I'm thinking that we need a reconciliation process between Cubans in both sides. We need to start to talk more about the things that we have in common, more than our difference. And that's the most sweet part and also the most sad part, because there is a lot of contradiction, there is a lot of back and forth, there is a lot of feeling, because this is an emotional thing. And that's the most difficult part for me, put away my emotions too, because this is not just my job, this is also my life, my family life, my friends' life, the part of my parents' life too. So there is a lot of people, there is a lot of pressure on me. There is a lot of my shoulders. That's why I don't talk about in the name of Cubans. I'm talking about my own experience. I'm talking about my perspective as journalist, but also someone who lives in Cuba, who suffered Cuba and also to enjoy Cuba. And that's the most difficult part, when someone talks me with so many, that someone who's totally disconnected to this wants to teach me about democracy or regimes or whatever. They think that the sanctions, and lie me about how the sanctions are good for the Cuban people. In what way? Tell me. People who has been in Cuba, but also doing this job, I have been interviewing people that are coming to Cuba in different moments for different reasons. Republicans, Democrats, liberals, independents. And the most of them are against, but I want to know that the 90% of them are against the sanctions, because they have been here, they understand Cuba, for different reasons, not because it's injustice. Some of them because they want to do business, because they're worried about money. They see here as a market. Some of them because they have family and they want to live better lives, for different reasons, but they are against the sanctions. That doesn't have anything to do with about our government. That's about their opinion about their own government and what is going to my country. So, how is it possible that you being a Cuban don't being against the sanctions? That's crazy. But it's also an industry of hate that was created in Miami and has been maintained until today. And it's sad because you can watch it like it being vocal. And that's another thing, that United States love perfect victims. US love perfect victims. But if you are not a perfect victim, I'm going to point you the finger at the first things negative that I hear about you. And that's why Cuba is so polarized topic. Because for people to talk about the sanctions, they need to put on the table first that we are regime, blah, 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 that we are tired to hear about that. And then, okay, I think that the sanctions are unfair, but that's the line of the entire speech. Then starting, I don't care about what is Cuba. Let's talk about what are we doing in Cuba. That should be the beginning of all the speeches, but sometimes it's difficult because if you talk positive about them, you're a communist or a socialist, and that's a bad word in the United States. For example, being in the United States and having conversation with people, I always, when they say about communism, socialism, they talk about that. They say, okay, what is socialism for you? What does it mean? Explain it to me. Do you think that have access to public, like quality public healthcare system is socialism? Yeah, some of them say, yeah, that's socialism. And I say, but do you know that U.S. congressperson or U.S. Congress people, only if they serve one period in Congress, they have access to free public and the quality healthcare system. Say no. Well, now you know that U.S. government and U.S. Congress are enjoying part of its socialism too, but you don't. So, and that's the role of the media and how bad they have been doing their work, because there is a lot of misinformation about Cuba. There is a lot of misinformation about socialism, and also about a stigma that we have been carrying our entire life. They always say that we are a failed state, that we are still a socialism means hunger, crisis, desperation, scarcity. But if socialism or the kind of system that we are trying to build here is all of that, what is the point of the sanctions? We don't need it. We are going to follow our own way. We don't need help. So what is the point of the sanctions? What is the point of the persecution? What is the point of the isolation? What is the point of all of that?
You know, it's funny because there's a very capitalist mentality that I hear interviewing workers around the country who are trying to unionize. And say, like, you know, when I'm interviewing black workers in Alabama who are trying to unionize at Amazon, and, you know, they are trying to organize so that they can improve their lives and improve their wages and all that stuff. And so Amazon will hire these outside consultants to come in and tell the workers why a union is bad for them and they should not vote for one. And what they'll always say is they'll say, like, look, you guys don't want a union because the union could come in here and they could get you a contract where you're earning less than you're making now. And so workers will say, like, well, if that's the case, then why don't you just let them come in? Because you would benefit. Like, you know, it's kind of like you're saying, it's like they keep saying it like they're trying to benefit the workers and save them from how much the union's going to hurt them. But it's really just scare tactics to try to get people to believe lies. And like you said, if socialism is this bad, then just let us do it. If a union's this bad, then just let us have one, because then you'll have to pay us less. So clearly there's someone's lying about something, you know? And I wanted to just kind of turn that into a final question, because I've had such an incredible time talking to you, but I want to be, I've kept you longer than I said I would, and I know I've got to let you go. But it just, I wanted to kind of zoom out and ask, like, if you had final words for working people here in the United States, because in so many ways, I am the kind of person you're talking about. I grew up as a first-generation Mexican-American. I grew up very conservative. I was a American capitalist. Like, that was our family. We thought that socialism was bad, that capitalism was good, that America was the greatest country on earth, and that if we worked hard, we could make a good life for ourselves and our family. And when I was a kid, one of the things that, you know, pop culture and adults would say, you know, to try to justify that is they'd say, well, here in America, you have all this consumer choice. You can go to the grocery store and you have a million different brands that you can choose from, right? And in Cuba, they have bread lines and they don't have any brands to choose from. And so that's why we're good and they're bad. And now I'm living in 2024 in Baltimore, and I go to the CVS down the street and the shelves are empty and the medicine's, like, you know, barely there. And, like, all the brands are owned by the three same companies, and people who maybe once believed that they could work hard and make a good life for themselves have kind of given up on that dream after 20 years of the United States, like, making life harder and more impossible for working people, while a few billionaires get richer all of our tax dollars go to war, like cost of living goes up. So it feels like all the things that we were told about capitalism when I was a kid, and all the ways that people used Cuba and countries like Cuba as examples for why socialism was bad. It's like, well, now most of us are just living in the world that capitalists were describing in the 90s, but when they were talking about Cuba. And like, I guess I just wanted to ask if you like, I hear this in the conversations that I have with people every week. People who tell me, I used to love this country, and then after the government deregulated the railroads and the railroads are making more billions than they ever have, one of them, you know, derailed in my backyard and blew up and poisoned me and my family, and now we're fucked. It's like more working people in this country are getting pushed into the bottom of society, and the capitalist society we grew up believing in is crushing us. So I wanted to ask if you saw much of that, or like what your impressions were of that when you came here, and what messages you would have for working people in the United States who are living through that right now.
It's difficult because I'm pretty sure that, as I said, the war has changed. The war has changed also for the United States. I don't say that you have country with you have capitalism system that was pretty bad because are focusing the people instead of the capital. But that's not the case that I just witnessed in the United States. Because if you say because you have more freedom, because you have more brands to choose, you really have more freedoms to choose, or you have to choose the brand that you can pay for? Because that's the thing. It's not that you have many options, all healthy, for example, for food, and you can choose whatever you want, the one that you like the most. It's not like that. It's like the one that you can pay, the one that you can allow to buy. And that's different. But if this is the kind of capitalism or the system or the freedom that you want and you got it, I'm happy for you. But in my case, that's not the thing that I want for me or for my country or for my people, because I understand that that's not actually freedom. That's not actually the thing that I worry the most. If I have to say something to someone who right now is struggling from working class, that they have a family or specific situation, I just say that the most important thing for me is stop to thinking in just one person, just one family, and start to stop to thinking like that and start to thinking about collective, what we can achieve together, how we can become more strong together, how we can get more wealthy together, how we can work less instead of spending more time with family, friends. That's the kind of life that I want. That's not the kind of life that I got right now, but that's the kind of life that I want to achieve. Like in a way that in a life that we can all live together, being okay together, and also start to focus on how be mentally more healthy, but also physically, and having time for do my own thing, but also to spend time with family, friends, partners. To dedicate time to your children instead of they spend the most of the time just with the face in front of their phones. So it's a different thing, and this is something that you can achieve alone. And that's difficult because in a society like United States, individuals are getting has the most of the focus. Like if you're always thinking in yourself, your family, that your family is also your wife or your husband or your partner and your children. That's all. Forget about the old generation that coming from before you. That's something quite different from us in Cuba and also in Latin America, families, our cousins, our family too. And we are trying to get as close as them as possible because we are thinking in a collective. In some way, if there is something that keep us alive until today, is that we think like a family, like a group of people that is not just linked by blood, that we're linked by empathy, by experience that we have been going through together. And that's the most important thing for survivance, in my opinion.
All right, gang, that's going to wrap things up for us this week. I want to thank our amazing guest, Liz Oliva Fernández, for taking the time to have that incredible conversation with me. And I want to thank Liz and the whole Belly of the Beast crew for the important work that they're doing. And as always, I want to thank you all for listening, and I want to thank you for caring. And I want to encourage y'all one more time to go check out Liz's 2 new documentaries, Hardliner on the Hudson and Uphill on the Hill, which you can watch on YouTube using the links that we provided in the show notes. You can also find all of Liz and Belly of the Beast's work at bellyofthebeastcuba.com. And you can also donate and support their work there, which you definitely should do, because these stories need to be told. And Liz and the whole crew are working their butts off to tell them the right way, and they need our support. We'll see y'all back here next week for another episode of Working People. And if you can't wait that long, then go subscribe to our Patreon and check out the awesome bonus episodes that we've got there for our patrons. And go explore all the great work that we're doing at the Real News Network, where we do grassroots journalism that lifts up the voices and stories from the front lines of struggle. Sign up for the Real News newsletter so you never miss a story, and help us do more work like this by going to therealnews.com/donate and becoming a supporter today. It really makes a difference. I'm Maximillian Alvarez. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Solidarity forever.
When my face you no longer see, I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever we go, we are going to roll the Union on the song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever hungry are we. Just as hungry can be. The song, I live on, yes, I live on. Where mean things are happening in this land, is read a song. I live on, yes, I live on. Wherever the book mean things are happening in this land is read, I live on. Yes, I live on. Wherever the videotape of me is shown, I live on. Yes, I live on. If I have help to make this a better world to live in, I'll live on. Yes, I'll live on. When my body is silent and in some lonesome grave, I live on. Yes, I live on. When my songs and poems are read, I live on, yes, I live on.
Thank you so much for watching the Real News Network, where we lift up the voices, stories, and struggles that you care about most. And we need your help to keep doing this work, so please tap your screen now, subscribe, and donate to the Real News Network. Solidarity forever.